before, but we claim him as being here from Brownsville. Person who was an NFL player, went to Harvard, was a U.S. congressman. I can't tell you how many great things to say about ColinAllred. We're so proud to have him in our community, so glad to have him here, and so happy that you came to join him. And with that, I'll turn it over to Colin.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for an introduction. You know, we were driving over here, and it felt kind of familiar for me. And I was like, I think this is close to where my grandma lived. And I looked it up, and so my grandmother's house was 5 minutes that way on West Jefferson. And when I was a kid, it seemed like a really big house. Like, we would pile into my mom's car, and then we'd drive down from Dallas every summer. And when you get there, it's like on the corner of a street, and it would seem like a big house, and there were a lot of kids up and down the street, and it just seemed like there was a lot going on. And I come back now that I'm a little bit older, and I realize it wasn't a very big house. But I just got a chance to talk to the owner, and I was like, do you remember who you bought this house from? And he said, well, yeah, it was a woman from Dallas. Yeah, that was my mom, right? And so it's personal for me coming back to Brownsville. And I want to thank y'all for coming out and for just being involved in these town halls that we've been doing all across the state. You're talking to folks, taking your questions for as long as we can, you know, having this dialogue. You know, for me, as I said, coming back here is personal, but I don't think I've ever come back and felt the level of fear that I feel this time. Like everywhere I've gone, whether it's McAllen or Edinburgh or Brownsville, we'll be in Laredo tomorrow, there's like a fear that's kind of permeating so much of the conversations. We go to a flea market, they say that half the stalls in the flea market that they usually have are full, and that they feel like it's the same impact they had during COVID. You go to a hardware store, and the hardware store is saying, well, you know, we're having about half the business that we normally have. I talk to leaders in the community, and they say, well, you know, a lot of folks are afraid. And I was talking to a teacher last night. She was saying that her daughter, she had to go on anti-anxiety medication because she was worried that something's going to happen to her mom, even though her mom is naturalized now, but she'd come here undocumented, and she'd become naturalized, and she was worried that they were going to try and somehow unravel that and take her mom away. And, you know, I don't think folks should be afraid in their community. I've never come down to the valley and felt like folks were afraid until now. I keep thinking about it, and I've been thinking about it not just here, but, you know, around the state. You know, this passage in Micah, they talk about, you know, Zion, and that someday, when the folks will beat their swords, you know, into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, and everybody will sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. It's a vision of a moral country where you can experience the fruits of your own labor, and where you're not afraid of a knock on the door or somebody wearing a mask taking you off the street. That in a country like that you have processes and laws in place that are just. That's what we have been. That's what we can work towards being, but that's not what we are right now. And it makes me angry, because there are so many folks who are struggling across our state. They're struggling with an economy that's not working for them. They're working harder and harder for less. They're spending less time with their kids. They're working overtime, and they still feel like they can't quite get ahead. And the last election, they were promised that on day one, inflation was going to go away, that the economy was going to be great again, that they wouldn't have anything to worry about. And instead of getting that, they got higher costs on their light bill, because this bill they passed is going to raise their light bill by around $250 a year, because they think that they don't want to believe in solar and wind power. Well, guess what? We're the #1 wind power state in the country. We're #2 in solar. When you do that, you make our light bills go up. They're going to spend over $2,000 more a year on consumer goods just because of these ridiculous tariffs that we have put in place, tariffs that are not there to protect our economy, but are basically there just to shake down some countries, sometimes just based on whether or not the president likes them or not. And folks are working harder and they're seeing that their health care is being taken away. I was just walking around this flea market yesterday. I just talked to this couple. I just stopped and talked to them. And the husband had cancer and he was in remission. And he told me that when he first got cancer, they didn't have health insurance. And his wife said, well, we sold everything that we had. We sold everything to pay for his treatment. But thank God, we finally got him on Medicaid. And I said, well, what about your kids? He said, yeah, we got our kids covered. And I said, well, what about you? She said, no, I'm not covered. And so I took her email and I thought, well, maybe we can get her on Medicaid. But when they talk about cutting Medicaid in our state, and we know that over 1 million Texans are going to be kicked off of it, it's folks like that couple who are going through cancer treatments, who've already sold everything they have, who are going to be impacted, the most vulnerable people in our state. And all for what? It wasn't to invest in our education, or in our infrastructure, or in our people, so they could cut taxes again for the richest folks in the world. Are you kidding me? And so, to me, what we have to make sure we do in this election, and it was personal for me, is grounding ourselves back in working people's lives and experiences. This is how I grew up. Raised by a single mom who was a public school teacher. My mom taught for 27 years. And she rented a house for 20 years in Dallas. For 20 years. She rented a house in a neighborhood because that neighborhood went to a good public school. And she wanted me to go to that school. And it wasn't until I was in the NFL that I could help her buy that house. Right? But the truth is, you shouldn't have to have a son in the NFL to be able to buy a house. You working full time? She's taking care of kids all day at school. She's reaching into her own pocket for the classroom. And you can't even buy your own house. Everything is kind of upside down right now as I see it. Folks who work hard and play by the rules can't get ahead. But if you're corrupt, if you're willing to cut corners, man, you're doing just fine right now. We have never seen corruption like this. It's just out in the open. It's right in front of you. They said, well, you know what? We're just going to give the President of the United States a jet. And it's not going to be for the country. It's just going to be for him. And you can just keep using it, but don't worry. It's not a bribe. Don't worry. Right? They're going to put a $200 million ballroom next to the White House. But we can't have the Corporation for Public Broadcasting so that folks can watch public television, listen to public radio. And you know that ballroom's going to be ugly. You know it's going to be ugly. Have gold all over. We have to knock it down. Right? So all the priorities are off. Everything is upside down. But the good news is, in our country, we have elections every couple of years. And we can express our displeasure with what's going on. And we can say, you know what? We demand that we have folks who will put forward ideas on how we can lower your health care costs, lower your housing costs, lower your child care costs, who know what that's like. I put out a plan for a more affordable Texas with a whole bunch of planks in it about how we're going to lower folks' costs. Some of them were very personal for me. So when I talk about first-time home buyers needing a little bit of help with their down payment, that's my mom's experience, right? When we talk about prescription drug costs and keeping those costs low, well, my mom's a breast cancer survivor, and the pills she has to take to deal with her breast cancer, making sure it doesn't come back, are expensive. When we talk about child care, I know folks, because my mom would leave me with any wise woman when I was a kid. If you appeared to have your stuff together, you could watch me for a little while, right? Because most families out there are struggling to find somebody who can watch their kids. They're spending huge amounts of their income just trying to find a place that's safe for their kids. And the thing is, as I've gone around our state, and I'm a fourth generation Texan, and I know who we are, when I talk to folks, what they want is just so modest. I've never met a Texan who says, I expect you to do everything for me, or I expect you to give me everything. It's always just, okay, you know what, if I had a little bit of help here, if I could just get past this, then I think we could be okay. If you could just make sure that we have a chance, and I think we can get ahead. It's really modest. But to do it, we're going to have to unrig what I consider to be a rigged system. There's a lot of times when I was in Congress, I was just sitting there thinking, why is it possible that we can have 90% of the country thinking that we should do something, like universal background checks, for example, on the sale of firearms. I grew up here, coming down here, there used to be, in the back of everybody's truck, you'd see a gun rack. If y'all remember what it was like back then, it might have a shotgun in it. But we would learn about responsible gun ownership. And so we'd say, well, why is it that if 90% of the country thinks we should do something, that we can't pass this into law? And it's like, well, you start looking at it and say, well, you know, we got some structural issues that are preventing us from doing what we know is right. And so then I know why folks start feeling cynical and start feeling like nothing is going to change. Because it's been hard as heck to get anything done at all. So when they gerrymander our districts, it's not just lines and people in seats. They're making it so that folks don't have a voice in Congress, and they're also sending more extreme people to the Congress who have no interest in passing bills to help you or passing bills to help you. They have no interest in it. That's not what they're there for. They're there to throw rocks and cause trouble and see if they can get on the evening cable news. Because the only thing they have to worry about is a small sliver of their primary electorate, because they're in a gerrymandered seat and they're not responsible to most of the folks they represent. So to me, we have to ban gerrymandering around the entire country. We've got to end it. And we can. We can require every single state to have nonpartisan independent commissions to draw your congressional districts. Wouldn't that be a novel idea, right? Instead of having politicians picking their voters, you had it the other way around. That seems like, kind of common sense. And, while you're in office, I don't think it's right that some folks are getting rich trading stocks on issues that they're legislating about. We have a term for that.
Yes.
We call it insider trading.
Yeah.
But it's legal in the Congress. For 6 years, I never traded a single stock, but I saw some folks who did. And I'm telling you, it's not right. So when you wonder why people think that Congress is about only more popular than foot fungus in polling, it's because they look at the Congress and see stuff like this. So we should ban things like that. When you have corporations that can literally purchase members of Congress, and they can say, through our campaign donations to you, and also to super PACs that are going to either be for you or against you, then you wonder why we can't take on some of these corporations and some of these special interests. Well, we should ban contributions by corporate PACs. They shouldn't be able to purchase our democracy. And the United States Senate is just as broken as the House. It used to be that the Senate was called the greatest deliberative body in the world. Does anybody see deliberating going on over there? I mean, for most of our history, the filibuster in the Senate was used very sparingly and very rarely. In fact, it was almost exclusively used to block civil rights legislation, anti-lynching legislation. And if you wanted to filibuster a bill, you had to stand up. You had to talk. You had to keep talking. You had to keep talking. You had to hold the floor, and you could pass it to someone else, and then they could talk. But that's how the filibuster worked. Now all you got to do is say, I object. Well, why do you object? Tell us. Does anybody remember when Cory Booker was talking for 6 days or whatever it was? I don't even know how long Cory went. I just texted him I hope you didn't go to the bathroom, brother. But while he was doing that, it probably generated some conversation. What's Cory doing? Why is he doing this? Sometimes having those debates help the country understand what's happening in a bill. I always think it's hilarious when I'll see some of my Republican colleagues, they'll be talking about a bill at a town hall, and they'll say, well, I didn't know that was in it. So, well, of course you didn't. You just rushed it through. There was no discussion, no debate. And so, yeah, of course you didn't know that provision was in it. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe sometimes they're just lying. But we should reform the filibuster so the Senate will work again. And when we fix the Congress, which is Article 1 of the Constitution, not the presidency, the Congress is, then we can rein in an out-of-control presidency. Because when you don't have a functioning Congress, you're ceding power to the executive. And we've been doing this for way too long. Things like DACA, which is a good program, should have been the DREAM Act. But because we can't pass legislation, we had to have executive action. But then you get somebody coming along to be president who doesn't respect the Constitution, who thinks that there's no limits on what they can do. But because the Congress is broken, then there's no check on them. And the whole system was set up to have checks and balances. And so we got some work to do to unrig a rigged system so that we can unrig a rigged economy. But I think we can do it. And I think it's possible. And the folks that I talk to understand that we have to. Because this is not sustainable for us. This path we're going down is one that will leave us in a place that we don't recognize. And before I take your questions, I just got to tell you, my commitment is, I've got I have two sons who are 4 and 6. In 20 years, they're going to be reading about this time. And they're going to come ask me, now they sit on my lap, then they'll come sit next to me. And they'll say, Dad, what were you doing when all this was going on? And to me, the only proper answer that I can give them is every damn thing I could. Right?
Thank you.
And I was fighting for you. I was fighting for your friends. I was fighting for our state. I was fighting for our Constitution. I was fighting for our people. I was fighting for our values. I was fighting for who we are. That's what we're involved in. And the way we fight is through elections. The way we do it is by coming to town halls and talking about what's on your mind and me telling you what I think. Sharing those ideas and then taking it out into the world and saying, you know what? Next November, we're going to get folks out to vote. So I've talked enough. I don't know if y'all took these little, did you get some of these? Does everybody get one? Yeah? Okay. Do you want to just raise your hands, ask a question? Yes, sir. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, sir. We've been watching for a long time.